Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this is At the Helm Sports. I'm your host, Derek Helm. Thank you for joining me for episode 157. Please be sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave those 5-star reviews if you're watching on YouTube. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Down in the comments section, let me know, who is your favorite running back on DraftKings, $7,000 and above? Looks like that's going to be the way to go this week. Looks like they are the best plays. Running backs have been by far outscoring the wide receivers for the most part. So who do you like there? Definitely probably going to have to try and fit as many high-priced running backs as you can in your lineups because it seems like that's the way to go this year in DraftKings. For me, DraftKings hasn't really been working out over the past couple weeks. Been just off, been hitting a lot of the right plays and just missing. Last week was a 1v1 playing Breece Hall over Bijan. So can't keep going back to the Jets. I mean, every time I bet on them, last week I had Giants money line, had Jets money line. We know how that worked out. So I should probably just stay away from New York sports in general. If you hear me talk about them later on, just pay no attention. But we're going to dive into the week 11 slate, go game by game, go through all the best DraftKings plays, some strategies, some stacks, all that good stuff. And then at the end, I'll go through some of the bets I like for this week. But if we dive right into it, we have 11 games on the slate. There are a couple teams on bye here. So we have Arizona, Carolina, the Giants, and Tampa Bay all on bye. Remember a couple weeks ago how I said it was just weird how they had no teams on bye? Well, next week you get 6. So just keep that in mind for your fantasy leagues. Maybe prepare this week if you're going to be affected by that, because most people are with 6 teams on bye next week. But as I said, for this week, so we have 11 games on the slate. Might as well dive right into it. First game on the slate, we have Green Bay at Chicago. 40.5 is the total here. Green Bay 5.5-point favorites on the road. Chicago has not looked great. Offensive line is decimated. Caleb looking a lot like a rookie. And that'll happen when you're under this much pressure. I mean, New England hasn't really been generating a ton of pressure, and Caleb was basically on the ground the entire game last week. So I just, this game is kind of a stay away from me from a DraftKings standpoint. Just, there's too many guys passing options on both teams. Like, who do you play? It's a dart throw every single week. So I just can't really make a case for Jaden Reed is probably the most talented on Green Bay, but he hasn't really been producing. Dobbs is probably the most consistent, but is he going to win you a DraftKings tournament? Probably not. Watson, you literally never have any idea what you're going to do. Wicks might have as many drops as he does catches, so that's concerning. And then on the Chicago side, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. You don't know what's going to go on there. Komet was involved for a little while, but he seemed to have disappeared. Now, Waldron's out, so maybe this offense looks a little bit better, a little bit different, but you have no idea who it's going to be. So it's very hard to stack these quarterbacks with anyone. I would prefer Love of the two, but Chicago's defense is much better defending the pass than they are the run. So probably would lean Jacobs and maybe Green Bay's defense, but that's pretty much all I like in this game. I don't really like a lot there, and I don't think I'm going to go to it at all. Next, we have Jacksonville at Detroit. Now, this one I do have some interest on the Detroit side. 47 is the total. Detroit laying 13 points at home, so heavy favorite. I mean, obviously we saw them squeak out a win last week, and 47-point total. Theirs is 30 points. So they are expected to absolutely roll here as double-digit favorites. And I might honestly have a Lion in every single one of my lineups. I don't see them failing here. Jacksonville has been absolutely horrific. I don't think you can make a case for anybody on the Jacksonville side. Mac Jones is terrible, which brings down all the pass catchers. Bigsby might be out, so ATN might have it to himself, but he's looked terrible. Detroit, you can't really run on, so I don't like that. Do like Goff stacks quite a bit this week. Now, obviously, threw the 5 picks last week, but I could see this kind of being a get-right game for him. Jacksonville is one of the worst teams defending the pass, so Detroit should be able to do whatever they want in this game, and it's pretty easy, too. It looks like Laporta not practicing again on Thursday, could miss with the shoulder injury. So if he's out, it condenses this target tree. You could basically go Goff, Amon-Ra, Jameson. A little bit expensive, but Goff is only 6,300. Jameson 58. So Amon Ra 8K. Maybe you got to find some value elsewhere, but I think there is some on this slate, and I think you can get a lot of this production on the Detroit side out of that passing game because, as I said, I could see it being a get right spot and them wanting to get Goff in a good headspace and have some success here. So I do like Goff stacks. If you don't love Goff, I think you could just make a case to play one of those two receivers by themselves and maybe they can have a huge day. Both running backs definitely in play as well. Gibbs 7,300, Montgomery 6,500. I kind of prefer Montgomery in this one. Seems to do a little bit better work when they are favorites and playing from ahead. So I do think it would be a more positive game script for him. Whereas Gibbs, you want a little bit more of the pass catching. Now, with that being said, Gibbs could get there on 10 touches. So he could definitely break a slate. But I do like Montgomery's upside a little bit in this and think he might get a little bit more work. So the $800 savings might make a little bit more sense. You can definitely make a case to play one of the running backs and one of the receivers. I mean, if they're going to score 30 points, it could definitely be more than one guy. Now, there is a chance here that maybe they fail from a DraftKings standpoint because the scoring is a little bit too spread out and they try and just get everybody involved. But I just think with this team total, with this spread, at home, it's try and get as many lions in your lineups as possible. And we'll talk a little bit more on some of the bets here because I think there's some stuff that stands out there as well. Next, we have Vegas at Miami. This one concerns me a little bit. 44 is the total, so not terrible. Miami laying 7 points at home. They looked okay Monday night, but I don't know if I love them laying 7 points. I get Vegas is terrible, but this Miami offense hasn't looked incredible all year. I don't really think you can make a case to overstack Tua. Waddle hasn't looked right. Obviously, Tyreek dealing with the wrist injury. I think everybody has already said it to this point. If they lost Monday, they probably shut him down for the season. So I think at any point he could be out of the game. 7,400. I'd just rather go elsewhere. So I really don't love them. I think I will play some Achane. 7,200. You just basically guaranteed he's going to catch at least 5 balls. And against this Vegas defense, he could break a long one. So I think 7,200 is an okay price for him. He would probably be my preferred play in this one. If you wanted to play someone on the Vegas side, they did say they're not going to go to Desmond Ritter, which thank God, because why would you ever do that? So I think Miami is good defending the pass, but Myers or Bowers, 5,600 for Myers, 58 for Bowers, I think potentially could be in play. If you really did want to stack up this game, they'd probably be the only bring back options, but I'd probably prefer them more in cash. I don't know that they necessarily have slate breaking upside. Now, Myers has been involved enough, but this Miami defense has been shutting wide receivers down. So I think the volume is there to make a case for those guys, but don't really love it. I will make a case more so narrative driven. Raheem Mostert, obviously didn't play on Monday night. McDaniel came out and he said, it was just part of the game plan. It's going to be different each week. He's still the leader in the clubhouse and in this backfield. So they are 7-point favorites. If they do roll here, I could see them actually getting Mostert a lot more involved, maybe trying to get him a touchdown just to keep him happy and keep him involved after not being heavily involved. Now, it's possible that maybe he is being phased out of the offense, but just the coach speak and the situation they're in, I could see Mostert getting some work here, and he is the goal line back for this team, so maybe he does come away with 2 touchdowns here. I don't think he has anywhere near the upside that Achane does, but at 5,800, you don't need the upside that Achane does. Next, we have the Rams at New England. Don't really like much here. 4.5-point favorites of the Rams on the road. 43.5 is the total. So again, not a crazy total. I think you can make a case for Stafford. You know where to go with it. It's Kupp, it's Puka. I kind of prefer Puka at this point, which I never really am a Puka guy, but Kupp just hasn't really looked great since coming back from the injury. Now, he's still heavily involved, so you can make a case to go there, but I think Puka has a little bit more upside at this point. $200 savings isn't really that big of a deal, but I would probably prefer Puka, and I actually like Kyron Williams quite a bit here, 7,900. New England not been great defending the run, so I do think you can make a case for Kyron at under 8K. Obviously, didn't look good Monday night. So I don't think he's as popular as some of the slates that we've seen here. So you can definitely make a case to go there. On the New England side, you can make a case for Drake May, but this Rams defense has been playing much better. May's only 5,600. I would pair him probably with Hunter Henry, and potentially he can get there. I don't like Ramondre. That this Rams defense has improved tremendously at defending the run. So 6,100 isn't a bad price for him. I think he could be fine potentially as a cash play. I think he's fine in your season long leagues, but from a DraftKings standpoint, I'm probably not going there. Probably honestly staying away from this game for the most part, other than Kyron and maybe a little Puka as one offs. Next, we have Cleveland at New Orleans. This is another pretty gross game, but Cleveland 1 point favorites on the road. 44.5 is the total. Jameson's in play, 5,500, probably even more so than Drake May. You know he's going to air it out. This New Orleans defense has looked absolutely terrible. So you can go there. You could pair him with Judy, 5,400. Tillman's still cheap at 5,300. Tillman would probably be the preferred option for me. And then obviously Njoku, 5,500. So it's a cheap stack. If you wanted to go there, you could bring it back with an Alvin Kamara at 8,200 or a Taysom Hill at 4,500. That they're obviously the two that are the most heavily involved and have the most upside. Taysom had an 80-yard touchdown called back last week. So I think you can make a case to stack it with those guys. I am not chasing the MVS. Now, I do think Carr will continue to take shots. It's what he does. It's why Shaheed was so good in this offense. But I don't think MVS is Shaheed. So if he's only getting 3 targets down the field, it's possible that he drops 2 of them. So especially if he's getting some ownership, I'd be a little cautious on that one. But I do have some interest in this game and might stack it up a little. I will say if Jameis does get popular, you can maybe make a case for Chubb. New Orleans not good defending the run. He's getting 15 carries at least a game. The issue is he hasn't really looked like Nick Chubb. I do think that he's still working his way back. Now, after the bye week, maybe he comes out a little fresher and has a little bit more of that burst. But even with the work he's been getting, haven't really been seeing vintage Nick Chubb. But against this defense, it's possible that he scores 2 touchdowns and getting the work that he does, he could actually pay off this 6K price tag. So I'd probably prefer it more if Jameis is getting some ownership as a leverage playing Chubb, but Chubb could potentially be in the player pool. Next, we have Baltimore at Pittsburgh. This one is kind of hard for me. I keep going back and forth. Baltimore, 3.5-point favorites. 48.5 is the total. Pittsburgh has owned Baltimore over like the last 5 years. They just shut Lamar down, and maybe this is a different iteration of this offense with Derrick Henry and some actual weapons. But I don't know. I do get concerned a little bit that maybe Tomlin just has Lamar figured out a little bit. Now, he's Lamar. He's playing incredible, but with the options that we have to pay up, especially closer to the 8K range at running back, maybe even wide receiver, as I said, maybe Amon-Ra, I don't think I want to pay 8K for a quarterback in this one against a really good defense that he hasn't succeeded against. So I'm probably staying away from Lamar. I really don't love Henry. I mean, you want Henry in games where it's going to be they're playing from ahead. I could see this being an old-fashioned AFC North game and kind of being a little bit slower. 49.5 is the total. I could see it potentially going under. Now, with that being said, Baltimore's defense is not good defending the pass. They can give up chunk plays, so it is possible, and I do expect them to score some points. It's so hard to pay up for these guys. Zay Flowers is okay at 6,900, but we've seen boom bust games from him, so it's a little volatile. Bateman, I think, is involved enough, 4,600 if you wanted to play him as a cheap one-off, or if you wanted to play Russell Wilson stacks and bring it back with a Bateman, I think that could kind of be sneaky and a little bit cheap. And then Mark Andrews at 4,600 isn't a terrible price. Obviously, he still has the upside and really doesn't need to do a ton to pay off that price. But picking 7K, I expect to be incredibly popular, especially as a one-off. I don't know if a lot of people just end up saying, I'll take all of Russell Wilson's production and just go with Pickens. I could definitely see that happening. So if Russ doesn't get a lot of ownership, I think he could become a pretty good play here. You pair him with Pickens, 5,900. If a lot of people aren't going there, it actually lowers your overall ownership in your lineups with Pickens. So that could be a nice little stack. Mike Williams, only his second week with the team, 4,100. All he does is run down the field. And obviously, they used him with the game on the line last week. So I think Russ likes taking those deep shots. If it worked out for MVS last week, I'd be a lot more confident that Mike Williams could put up some numbers on limited targets down the field than MVS. So just something to keep in mind if you really wanted to stack this game up. If you wanted to go with Russ and Pickens and him, and then bring it back with maybe a Zay Flowers or a Bateman, or even if you did want to get cute with Henry, I think there's some better running back options at that price range this week. So I'm probably staying away from Lamar and Henry, considering a Flowers, Andrews, Bateman, and then maybe a little bit of Russell Wilson action here. Najee, I don't love against this Baltimore defense. Jalen Warren all of a sudden not practicing on Thursday with, I believe, a back injury. So definitely something to keep an eye on. If he is out, Najee would get a ton of work. Don't know that I would end up getting there anyway, but just something to keep your eye on. Next, we have, excuse me, Minnesota at Tennessee. This one, gross. Again, probably not going to play much in it. Minnesota 6-point favorites on the road. Darnold looking like he's turning back into Darnold. 39.5 is the total. Will Levis sucks. Minnesota brings tons of pressure. I just don't see that working out well for Levis. So I can't go there. I'm not chasing Calvin Ridley's production. I know he's been heavily involved, but the Vikings can give up yards through the air. Easy for me to say. But I really don't think that I want to chase the Calvin Ridley. So not going there. You can make a case for Westbrook Akine. Probably pretty volatile, but scored a touchdown for the last 5 weeks, 3,600. If you're absolutely starving for some value, I think you can actually make a case that he might be in play. And then on the Viking side, as I said, I don't like Darnold. This Tennessee defense isn't terrible. So Aaron Jones banged up with the rib injury. We could see Cam Akers mixed in a little bit more if Jones does go. Jefferson all the way up there at 8,600. He just hasn't been paying off that price tag. You know, he's still the best wide receiver in football. He's still been productive, but I'm not paying up for that. Addison, just nah. And Hawkinson, 4,700. You can definitely make a case for. 46% of the snaps last week, still had 8 targets. So he's heavily involved in only his second week back. You would assume in week 3 he's going to play a little bit more of a snap share. So 4,700 for him. I think he's definitely in play. He'd probably be my preferred play in this game. Next, we have Indy at the Jets. This one is just so gross. I don't even want to talk about it because I kind of want to play some Jets. Indy's not good. The Jets are not good either. Jonathan Taylor, 7,600. Love it. I mean, look at what Connor did to this Jets defense. Look at what everybody's been doing to this Jets defense. They cannot tackle. So Jonathan Taylor, 7,600. Absolutely love that smash play. Where he's priced, going to be interesting to see if people go there. How much so? I don't think he's going to be low owned, but I don't think he's going to be high owned either. So definitely want to keep an eye on that. Pittman, don't know if he's going to be able to go. It looks like he probably will. I don't know that I love any of these receivers with Richardson in there, especially against this defense. You can make a case for Mitchell. It seems like he's had a connection with Richardson, but I really don't love it there. On the Jets side, 7,500 for Breece Hall seems way too expensive for what he's been doing and how they are just not using him correctly. With that being said, I think this Indy defense is terrible, and nobody's going to play Breece Hall. So if in large field GPPs you wanted to make a case for it, fine. Garrett Wilson, I do still have some interest in, 7,100. Devontae's banged up, wrist injury, and an illness. Hasn't been practicing Wednesday or Thursday. If for some reason he can't go, I think it makes Wilson a great play. He should be involved enough anyway, but those are really the only people I'm looking at in this game. If I wanted to do a skinny stack with Taylor and maybe bring it back with a Garrett Wilson, that's a possibility. But come Sunday, it might just be Jonathan Taylor for me and nobody else from that game. Next, we have Atlanta at, actually, I don't even know if I said the total of the last one. That's 43.5. Jets are favored by 4. Jets shouldn't be favored by 4 over anybody, so bet the Colts. Anyways, Atlanta at Denver. This one's a little concerning. 44 is the total, 2.5. Denver favored at home. Denver's look good. Atlanta's been good at times. Kirk Cousins seems to be a little bit banged up. 6,500 looks like he's going to be able to play, but I don't think I want to go with Cousins stacks against this Denver defense. They are very good defending the pass. Mooney all of a sudden is dealing with an Achilles injury. I have not seen at all how serious it is. An Achilles never sounds good. I don't think he tore it. Otherwise, it would have said he tore his Achilles and he's not playing. But at the moment, he's listed as questionable. So keep an eye on that. If he can't go, would probably mean a lot more for London. But if he has Sertan on him, I don't love London. So for me, it would be Bijan, 7,800. Still a great price, heavily involved, catching a ton of passes, had his first 30-point game last week. So I do like him. I think getting there on the ground is a little bit easier against Denver than it is through the air. So that would be my preferred play on Atlanta. I think Bo Nix is in play. 6,200 is a little pricey for him, but he's been getting there. Gets there through the air and gets there with his legs. So I don't hate it. You pair him with Cortland Sutton or play him naked. And Sutton's been getting there too at 5,900. So that would be the preferred one. I know some people are going to make a case to play Audric Estime, 4,500. Heavily involved last week. Coach speak with Peyton saying he's going to get more involved. But if they get behind in this game somehow, I don't think he's involved at all. If they're playing from ahead, yeah, maybe. But we just, regardless of who it's been and how many touches they get, there really haven't been that many productive games from these running backs on this side. And maybe you could say Estime's better than Javonte or better than Jaleel McLaughlin, but Estime also has a fumbling problem. So there's a possibility that he comes in and fumbles 2 times. So don't really love it. At 4,500, you can make a case for it, probably more so in cash, but with how many great running back plays there are on this slate, I don't know if I'm going to end up getting there. Next is probably the best game by far, I would think, on the slate. We have Seattle at San Francisco. 48 is the total. San Francisco 6.5-point favorites at home. So it looks like the books are expecting San Francisco to roll here. They've had some hiccups and some issues and really not been able to just put it all together. You would have to assume that could be coming soon. So do like San Francisco. McCaffrey, 88% of snaps right out of the gate. That's definitely encouraging. I will say he didn't look like McCaffrey, though, similar to what I said with Chubb. It's just, I don't know that the burst is necessarily there yet. Now, another week back in, maybe him mentally was easing himself back in. And with the amount of usage that he got right out of the gates, obviously you make a case that you could play McCaffrey here. And I don't think the price is really even that much at 8,300. So I'd expect him to be pretty popular. Now, if he gets to a 40% range, maybe I might consider going elsewhere because I do think there are some good running back plays on the slate. I think you can make a case to go back to Purdy stacks this week, but Purdy's only 6,600. And I mean, Kittle's a little bit banged up. If for some reason he couldn't go, then it makes it super easy. You play Debo, you play Jawan Jennings, Pearsall, two of those guys with Purdy, and that's all you got to do. But I absolutely love Jawan Jennings this week. 5,300, I think, is a great price for him. He's averaging 71 yards a game when he's playing. He's actually got elite numbers, 26% targets per route run, 2.84 yards per route run. Those are very elite numbers. It's just he's been incredibly productive when he's on the field. Debo, 6,800. I think a lot of people are probably going to be scared away. Just he hasn't really been healthy. With McCaffrey back, maybe it lowers his ceiling a little bit. Kittle's been the one scoring the touchdowns. So I think Samuel could be low owned this week, and that's usually when you want to play Debo. But I say that he might not be that low owned because if a lot of people do go to Purdy, then they're probably going to pair him with Purdy. So just want to keep an eye on that. And then obviously if Kittle is playing, he's been the best tight end this year. 6K is probably still too cheap for him. On the Seahawks side, you can make a case for Geno Stacks, but hasn't really played well outdoors at San Francisco. I don't know that I love it, and it's difficult to know who to pair him with because Metcalf is back, so obviously he's the preferred one. I will play quite a bit of Metcalf, 6,500. JSN is 6,500 as well. They were kind of, you know, pricing him as if Metcalf wouldn't come back. I just don't see JSN doing what he did against the Rams, or I just don't see it with Metcalf in the lineup. Now, 6,500, nobody's going to play him. So if you do want to play him and say, you know what, he earned a bigger role in this offense and maybe he can become the alpha, maybe. I mean, Grubb did talk him up and say they need to get him the ball more, but it would probably be DK for me. You can make a case for JSN. I'd probably prefer JSN as a one-off because, you know, he if he's getting there, it probably means that Metcalf and Lockett aren't. So maybe you could just pair him with Geno, but I think it would probably be him far and away the best receiver on this team. So maybe Geno doesn't necessarily get there because I think for Geno to get there, usually it would probably have to be another pass catcher along with him. So if you're going to play JSN, I would say more so in larger field stuff and probably more so as a one-off. I don't mind DK as a one-off. And Kenneth Walker, 7K. I do think that, you know, he hasn't been as productive here lately, but still heavily involved, especially in the passing game. Still has the long play upside, still has touchdown upside. So 7K, I think he's definitely in play here. Probably a great bring back for Purdy stacks. If you wanted to go Purdy and a Pearsall and Kittle or Jennings and Kittle, that's a pretty cheap stack. You bring it back with Kenneth Walker or a Metcalf, and that could work out pretty well. Or if you really think this game far and away gets there over the rest of them, you could actually make a case to play Metcalf and Walker and a Purdy stack. So a lot of ways you can attack this game. It's probably going to be one of my higher owned games and most people's for very good reason. Last game we have Kansas City at Buffalo. Now, a couple years ago, this would have been the game by far, but the current iterations of these offense, not so much. I will say from a late swap standpoint, everybody's going to go to that Seattle, Kansas City, or Seattle, San Francisco game. So if you wanted to swap over to this game, probably makes a ton of sense. Josh Allen, I don't love against this Kansas City defense. They have been just pretty good. I don't know at 7,800. Like I said, I don't want to pay up for Lamar. So Allen, it becomes a little bit easier if Cooper can't go because then you just pair him with Shakir and basically Knox. And it's really not that expensive. Knox 3,500. I do expect to be pretty popular here as a one-off, probably a cash play, but you know, we've seen him score touchdowns in the past with Allen. So if you wanted to just go Allen and Knox and then let it fall where it may, if it goes to Hollins or Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir, I think you can make a case for that. So that might be a way to play Allen. I don't love James Cook against the Kansas City defense. And then same thing, Buffalo's defense is pretty good as well. So I don't really love Hopkins, but 5,700, I think he's cheap enough so you can make a case for it. I'm not going to pay 6,300 for Kelsey this week. Heavily involved. It's possible we could see a Kelsey game come here soon. I just don't know if it's this week. So I'd probably prefer Hopkins there. And I actually do like Kareem Hunt quite a bit, 6,700. I think he gets a little bit forgotten this week by people with potentially Pacheco coming back. You know, I think people are kind of over Kareem Hunt, but he's involved in the passing game as well. Get some red zone looks, some goal line looks. Buffalo much easier to run on than they are pass on. So I think Hunt would be my preferred play. And then Dawson Knox, not going to play James Cook, maybe Allen, but really don't love this game overall. So that's going to do it from a DraftKings standpoint. I think it's a very similar slate to last week where you don't necessarily have to overstack these games. You don't have to force a bring back. Definitely want to just make a case for who you think the best plays are and play them because I could see it being a little bit lower scoring of a slate, maybe not as low scoring as last week, but with only 11 games and none of them really far and away looking like the greatest environments, I wouldn't force too many overstacks other than a couple spots. If we're looking at some bets that I like for this week, I actually have a couple that stood out to me. One is Detroit. 13-point favorites. That line is literally going up every second. That was the lowest I could find it on DraftKings. And I see it being higher than that come Sunday. I just don't see a scenario where Detroit falls short in this game. Jacksonville is terrible. I don't think Mac Jones can keep up. So I think Detroit's going to have their way in this one. So minus 13, I love that. Then also like Goff, 221 and a half, over 221 and a half passing yards. I think that's a great bet. He should easily get there. Even if he plays three quarters, I think he can get there against this Jacksonville defense. And as I said, after throwing the 5 picks, I think they want to give him a little bit more confidence at home in a game where they can literally do whatever they want. So Jacksonville will give up big plays. So I could see a couple bombs to Jameson. Maybe Amon-Ra breaks a long one, even a dump off to Gibbs that goes to the house. So Goff, 221 and a half, I think isn't bad. I think I also saw his over passing touchdowns 1.5 at minus 120. So I don't hate that either, but I took the passing yardage. Next, we have Christian McCaffrey over 28 and a half receiving yards. I like that quite a bit. First game back, he had 6 catches on 7 targets last week. Now, granted, most of his yardage came on a long pass, but that's definitely in his repertoire. And if he's going to get 6 catches, 5 catches, I love him going over that 28 and a half yard mark. So a couple I'm considering. I don't love them, but might go there. Russell Wilson over 225 and a half passing yards. He's done it 2 of his 3 games. Last week was like 198, I think he threw for. So not great last week, but against this Baltimore defense, especially if Baltimore can get out to a lead, they tend to be able to score. So Wilson's probably going to be forced to throw quite a bit in this one. So 225 and a half yards, I don't think is crazy for him. Haven't bet it yet, but definitely considering it. And then another one, now that I see that Ritter isn't playing, Jacoby Myers over 5.5 receptions. I saw that at as low as minus 105. So I think that's a good bet too. I don't know that Miami can definitely limit them from a yardage standpoint. They've been very good at limiting wide receivers, but with all the targets that he's getting, I could see him getting a lot of underneath stuff, having 6 catches and maybe not a ton of yardage, but I definitely think that the 6 catches are in play. So considering that as well. That's basically what I got for this week. As always, check out thehelmsports.com. Check the My Bets tab. Everything that I end up deciding on will be in there on Sunday and then also Saturday for college football. Check out yardsperfantasy.com. Have my cash game right up there every Saturday. And then the madlabmma.com. Obviously, we have the Tyson Jake Paul fight. Have that covered. Have John Jones and Stipe. That's going to be a huge card. So Mad Lab will have everything covered on that from a wagering and DraftKings standpoint. Definitely want to get in for that. And then with your MMA subscription, you get free NFL. So you get access to all of our bets and my Contrarian Quarter DFS write-up, as well as the roster bully tool. So check that out, themadlabmma.com. But that's going to do it for this week. As always, thank you for listening. I am your host, Derek Helm. And remember,
Just have fun out there.